Latin was the language of the western part of the empire, Greek the language of the eastern part. And this meant also all barriers were removed, so that meant that trade was free, and anybody in the empire could freely walk or ride or whatever, or move about from one part of the empire to another without having to stop at border guards and being questioned by border guards, what do you want to do? All the border guards were removed. And this, by the way, was one of the things that was to pave the way for Christianity, which came later. The empire was united and travel was inexpensive and relatively safe. The Romans moved in with their armies, and as much as possible, they cleared out the sea of all pirates. In fact, Julius Caesar, when a young man had been captured by pirates who held him for a ransom, his family paid the ransom, but Julius Caesar told the pirates, "You just wait and see, I'm going to have you all crucified." And as soon as Julius Caesar became emperor, he sent a navy in to grab the pirates who had held him for ransom and crucified every one of them. But he helped clear the sea of pirates. Caesar Augustus did. The pirates eventually changed their ways and went back to port, or went back to port, but the ones that didn't were taken care of in other ways. A lot of your outlaw and bandit gangs were cleared out. Again, there was some kind of law and order that made travel easier and cheap. In general, things were never better. Things were fairly bright. Your book goes on to talk about what culture was like, what literature was like, Roman law, slaves, all this. In the field of literature, one of their great historians was a historian named Tacitus, and he wrote a lot of what we have today, and regrettably I don't see his name here, so I'm not going to write it down. The greatest poem was Virgil. Virgil believed it was Rome's destiny to conquer the world, and I must say Rome never intended to conquer the world when it started out. But if you read, Virgil said it was Rome's destiny, go ahead and conquer because this is what you're fated to do. The Romans, one of the big gifts they gave to us, something Greeks had not used much at all, was the dome. Yes, do remember this about Roman art. The dome. The Roman Senate was covered by a dome, and if you go to every state capital, with hardly any exception, state capitals are covered by a big dome. Now, one exception is South Dakota. I understand South Dakota's capital is a tall, tall building. It can be seen for miles. But to go to Washington, D.C., or into the Capitol building, we have a dome, patterned after the Roman domes. Same thing, go to Atlanta, just a few miles south of here. The Atlanta Dome is covered by a thin layer of gold. I mean, all of you know what I'm talking about, I'm sure. Yeah, very thin layer. That was mined here in the Georgia's mountains, near Dahlonega.
Did you say the great Roman historian?
Tacitus. Don't worry about it. His name is not here in the book, so I am not going to ask him on that test here. Tacitus. I mean, he's very important. I mean, if you study, go to your next course you take in ancient world, will probably feature Tacitus. Tacitus, by the way, is one of the few people outside the Gospels who mentioned Jesus. One of the few. But he had no doubts that Jesus existed and was real. The Romans, again, were the first people to use concrete on a massive scale. They built large public baths, large amphitheaters capable of seating up to 50,000 spectators. All this because they learned the basic engineering skills. The basic thing about engineering, to build something, you have to first get the foundation right. If you get that building on a solid foundation, it will grow. Now later, an Italian made a mistake, built an 800-foot tall tower called the Tower of Pisa. That's not on a good foundation, and it has been leaning from the beginning. And I remember reading in 1960 that it was going to fall in the 1970s. And I've spent a lot of my life thinking, how can that building be repaired? And folk, I think the best way is for them to label each, as I take the building apart stone by stone, label each stone, shore up the foundation, and then put it back together again. But nobody seems to want to do that. Otherwise, it's going to lean and lean and lean, and one of these days it's going to fall. But anyway, the original Roman architects were really, really good at putting up a solid foundation. Now, Roman law, I must emphasize that Roman law was codified at the beginning on what they call the 12 tables. Here I could compare the 12 tables to the 10 Commandments, even though the 12 tables are much more involved and much longer. But the basis for law was these 12 tables, and that all the laws that were made were supposed to conform to the standards of these 12 tables. One of the reasons that Rome conquered the world was Rome had a justice system that was unequal. They assumed a man was innocent until you could prove him guilty. They said that anyone who's accused is allowed to stand up and defend himself before a judge. The judge, in turn, was to listen to both sides of an argument and weigh the evidence heavily before rendering a decision. Their justice system was so well done that two Jews who did not like the justice system they found in Judea went to Rome and said, "Will you please come over here and conquer us? Our rulers in Judea are treating us just terribly," and they told of all kinds of injustice. Now, I mean, not to be in any way anti-Jew, but one of the problems the Jews had, their justice system was so bad that a lot of the people left and spread all over the world in what's called the Great Dispersion. This is going to become very important later, so hold that thought. But anyway, the Jews then were found all over the empire. Why is this important? It was later to help the spread of Christianity that came later. Christianity being an offshoot of Judaism. But anyway, the Roman justice system was so well liked that it helped keep down rebellions and revolts that other places had. Now, again, one group of people who did rebel were the Jews, who rebelled twice and finally were kicked out of Judea entirely. Another group who rebelled was the British, who eventually Rome abandoned them to the Germans. Said, "Hey, you know, we just can't afford to keep you up anymore." Roman law, though, was they believed in something called natural law that they believed everybody would agree with. Now, I've got 3 minutes. I want to digress a little bit when I'm on the subject of natural law. When Germany was forced to surrender in World War II, a bunch of Nazis were called together for trials for war crimes. And this is the one and only time in history this has been done. It was called Crimes Against Humanity. They were called for killing 15 million innocent civilians, innocent people, of whom 6 million were Jews and 9 million other people who Hitler deemed undesirable. Well, the defense attorneys used startled the prosecution, where the prosecutor had to ask the judge for recess. The defense said there's no such thing as natural moral law. I mean, they assumed that every one of us believed that, hey, no dictator should kill his own people just for no reason. Well, the defense said there's no such thing as natural moral law, and any sovereign state can do anything it wants to with any of its citizens, and nobody outside has any right to intervene. And again, the prosecution, on hearing his defense, was so startled, they asked the judge for a recess. Well, they said, how should we answer an argument like this? The argument did not fly. But again, the prosecution argued that there were natural laws which even Hitler should have abided by, and so should the Nazis. The Nazis were guilty of violating natural laws or the basic human rights. Therefore, several Nazis were executed. Several others spent many, many years in prison in a process called denazification. But again, the Romans believed that there were natural laws that everybody should agree with. Gave rise to what's known as the Law of Nations. All right.